So you're all jazzed about buying a piece of land in Sandpoint, you're ready for that slower, more peaceful lifestyle, but then you find out the hard way that the property you bought, it's not what you thought it was. Maybe you can't put a sewer in, or you got the worst well in the county. Or worse, you realize you can't even use the land for what you dreamed of. But don't worry, I got you covered. In this video, I'm gonna break down the 10 most critical mistakes to avoid when buying land in Sandpoint. That way you can buy with confidence. Let's go ahead and dive in. First on the list is skipping the perc test. So you're super excited about buying your piece of land, but you have to get a sewer in and you don't do the perc test. If you can't put a sewer in, or if your sewer is gonna cost you $50,000, that can really wreak havoc on your plans. So what is a perc test? In the summertime, sometimes in the spring, maybe in the fall, you bring out a piece of equipment, an excavator, and you dig a hole. The county's going to come out, they're going to inspect, and they're going to look at the soil to see how well it's holding or how well it's draining water. They're also going to see if the hole pulls up with water. And that is basically site evaluation to see your soil condition on how much it can absorb when you're flushing the effluent down the tank. And if you don't know how a septic system works, all your sewer goes into a tank, and this is very basic. It goes into a tank. Your solids are going to stay in a chamber, and the effluent, the liquid, is going to rise up, and there's going to be a hole that it goes down, and then it's going to disperse down some leach lines that is going to drain into the ground. When I'm working with people on buying land, I tell them when you go to improve it that the septic should be one of the first things that you can do, because when you put in a septic system, there's a lot more guidelines on where you can put it. So you need to be so many feet away from the property line. If there's standing water, you have to be so many feet away from that. Your well, when you install the well, you have to be so many feet away from your well. And then it's the condition of the soil. If you pick a location that's too wet, well, that's not going to work. That's going to cost you more money. So now you have to move your drain field over here and your tank and everything else. So I tell people to start with the septic system, because you can put your well anywhere. You can bring power in anywhere. It's that septic system that you have to be so many feet away from. So I would start there. Don't skip on the perc test, because if you buy that piece of land and it costs more, or you can't put in a septic system, that's going to ruin your plans. Spending $800 on the test and the excavator to find out, whoa, I'm going to save myself $20,000, $30,000 because this is going to be a complex system. That's going to be a good investment. All right, moving on to our second item is going to be well reports. So again, you're buying a piece of property and you ignore to look at the well reports. I did this when I moved up here. My real estate agent didn't really educate me on buying vacant ground. Granted, it's not completely up to them. There's some onus on myself for looking into things, or at least asking questions, which I did not do. And when we went to drill our well, we were 700 feet deep and we were doing like a half a gallon a minute. It was pathetic. It was a ton of money. Had I got the well reports, had I known more about that location, I don't know if that would have stopped me, because I love the location, I love the setting. There was so much about that property that I loved that I may have gone and bought it anyways. However, it would have been nice to know more about the wells in that location. So when I work with clients and buying property, what we do and what you should do with your real estate agent is, when you identify the one property, get the parcel number, call Horsley Drilling. I think they're the best. They're going to answer your phone call, and they will actually get you an estimate on the cost of what they think it's going to be to drill a well. They're going to say, hey, we think it's going to be 400 feet. We're going to go through this type of material, and you can expect to pay X amount of dollars. Not too many companies will do that in a timely manner for you. There's some other really good companies up here, but Horsley is my go-to. They are fantastic. Moving on to number 3, and it's assuming that utilities are essentially accessible, meaning power. There might be power at your neighbor's house, but because of the way of the land and everything, it's coming over a ridge, and you would have to get an easement from your neighbor. Maybe your neighbor doesn't want to do that, and for you to get power, you have to go a half mile down the road, come up the hill, and you still have to get easements from neighbors. So don't assume that power is right there. Power is one of the easiest utilities to figure out, but it's still a step that you want to take. You can call the power company. It's either Avista or Northern Lights. You call them and say, hey, here's the parcel number, here's the legal description, where's the closest transformer to this property? They're going to tell you. Let's rope in internet with this section as well. There's not fiber everywhere. There's not even DSL everywhere. The good thing about Starlink, since it came out, you can pretty much get internet anywhere, and it's not as big of a concern. If you need a VPN connection, yeah, Starlink may not be the best option for you if you're working from home. But again, do not assume that even internet is going to be available at that location. What's great about Starlink, you can download the app and you can scan the sky, and you can kind of get a feel of, yeah, this is going to be great, or I'm going to have to take down just this one tree because I'm going to build the house right here. So just do those few extra steps when you're looking at vacant ground. Moving on to number 4, and it's not getting a new survey. So is getting a new survey when you're buying a piece of property a necessity? Not for everybody. Not everyone needs it. If you plan on building your house right on the property line, you may want to get a survey done before closing, because even though you or using OnX or the Bonner County GIS system or Kootenai GIS system, those lines are not 100% accurate. I've seen it sometimes where, man, they're within a foot or two or maybe 5 feet, but I've seen them off by hundreds of feet at a time. And you don't want to buy a piece of property looking at OnX or GIS and realize, holy cow, like I didn't realize I was inheriting or buying this massive hill and there's no flat spot to build. I would definitely look at getting a survey before you close if you plan on building really close to the border. If you get this nice 10-acre, 5-acre, and you're gonna build right in the middle, it's not quite as important, and a lot of buyers, they just skip and they get a survey down the road. But if you plan on putting up a fence or maybe a shed or a small garage near the property line, I would go ahead and encourage you to get that new survey. You can do just that one line. You're ensuring you're building on your side. You're putting the fence on your side of the property. You do not want to have neighbor disputes later down the road. Moving on to number 5, and it's not considering railroad tracks and trains. Because Sandpoint, we are a train town. You're going to hear the train. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're going to hear it. With that being said, there are actually a few couple of places you can get away from the train, kinda, and that's going to be Far East, Sagal, Northeast, Sandpoint, and a few other areas. Bonners Ferry, there's not as many train tracks up there or trains coming through. You can escape the train, go into Bonners Ferry, and even down into Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County. But if you're going to be in Sandpoint, Sagal, Dover, Hope, Laclede, you're going to hear the tracks unless you go way, 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 way up into the mountains. Pay attention to where the crossings are, because if you're, say, a quarter of a mile from a crossing, that's where the train is going to honk, and it's going to be loud if you're super close to those tracks. So just keep that in mind when you're looking around. If trains are going to be an issue, how many tracks are you going to be crossing? How close in relation to the tracks and to a crossing you're going to be. Moving on to number 6, and that's overlooking flood zones and wetlands. So we have a bunch of areas that have wetlands in them and might be in a flood zone. And when you look at the county GIS system, you can actually pull up what the flood zone looks like. And you're going to see these letters, A, B, and C. A is more chances of a flood, B, not as much, and C, even less. And basically, it's a 100-year flood map. And what that means is you have a 1% chance every year of flooding in that area. If you're in a flood zone, you're gonna have to get flood insurance. It's more expensive, but what's gonna be more of an issue, or not really an issue, but more of a concern, is wetlands, because we do have quite a bit of wetlands up here, and that can restrict what you can do on the property, depending on your wetlands and how wet it is. You could have a mosquito problem. You can take material out of the wetlands, so if you wanna have a pond, you can extract the material out of the wetlands, but you can't even put that material that you took out back into the wetlands. So you can't put anything into wetlands. Now, does that mean if you want to bring a chair out there and sit in the wetlands and see all the animals that it attracts? Yeah, you can do that. Like, you can bring a chair because it's portable, it's not permanent, you can take it with you. You just can't put a permanent structure or fill or rocks or trees. You can't do anything like that in wetlands without getting a permit. That can be very expensive. Number 7, and that is failing to research the zoning laws. Maybe you want to have a family compound and you're going to buy this 20-acre parcel and you're going to break it out so each one of your 3 kids have some property. Well, just because you have 20 acres does not guarantee you, does not automatically allow you to break it up. The zoning may not allow you to do that. Maybe you want to have a bike park or you want to do something really special with your property, but the zoning laws do not allow you to do that. And there's ways around that legally, like you have to submit a variance and do all this paperwork and do that. But I just want you to be aware of that. Like, yes, we're the land of the free up here and we're pro do what you want to do with your property, but there are going to be restrictions on what you can do with your property. Maybe you buy a house and you're in a suburban zone, but you wanted cows and you're getting 5 acres. Well, you may not be able to have a cow because you're zoned suburban and the zoning laws do not allow that to happen. So super important to look at those zoning laws as you're buying vacant ground to make sure that you can do what you want to do with your property. And that's going to lead us to number 8, and that's ignoring easements and deed restrictions. So when you buy that piece of property, you're going to have easements on your property. And do not freak out. And do not ask me what those easements are ahead of time, because I don't know. Not until the title company, they do their deep dive digging and they pull all that information and they provide it to us. I know in some states, they make it super easy to pull those easements. That's not Idaho, that's not my experience. So what type of easements are we talking about? Well, you're gonna have utility easements unless you're really far out into the mountains. And even at that point, you might have some easements, because a lot of times, decades ago, 50s, 40s, whatever, utility companies would just pick sections, and we're talking like a lot of square miles of land, and they just said, we're gonna put an easement on all of this so that way we can bring our telephone line through here. Well, guess what? That was done 100 years ago, and they're not going to be doing it. More than likely, you're going to have utility easements on your property. You want to know where those easements are. A lot of times they're at the front of the property. You might have a road easement. You might have, if you are in an area where you can see the lake, the river, the valley, there might be view easements for your neighbors. What that means, if you have these tall trees and you love the trees, you can't see the lake, or maybe you can, but from another piece of property, and that's where you built your house, but your neighbor can see the lake if these trees are cut down from their side of the property. Well, guess what? If they have a view easement, they can come in and chop those trees down. They don't have to ask you, they can just do it. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, how common is all this? Pretty uncommon. I don't see a whole lot of view restriction easements. In fact, I've only seen it once. You might get an easement where I sold the land to my relative, but I still wanted to have access for ease to access the backside of my property, so I put that in for me to use. That's what we mainly see easements for up here in North Idaho. Is it common? Not really. Unless you have a shared driveway. If you have a road that's going through several properties, you're going to see that easement, and that's legal. And when you have that road easement that accesses other properties beyond you, they cannot put up a fence and block you out. Number 9, and that's skipping talking to neighbors. So I find this really valuable, and if you see the neighbors are out, go talk to them. See if they have more insight about that piece of property. Does it get super wet? What is it really like? Is there any neighbor disputes between that current homeowner and surrounding neighbors? It's just a good way to get extra intel on that piece of property that's often overlooked. I get it. You might feel like, well, geez, you're in Idaho and you guys all have guns, and if you come on my property, you're gonna shoot me and leave me alone. I'm gonna leave you alone. There is some of that, but for the most part, no. If your neighbor's out, you wave them down, hey neighbor, looking to buy this, they know it's for sale. Hey, I have a couple questions for you, and ask those questions. Whatever questions that are generating in your head, ask them, and more than likely they're gonna be really cool and nice about it, and you might get a friend out of it. In fact, I had some friends, clients, they're friends now, their best friends up here came from that exact thing. They waved them down and asked them questions about a piece of property. They're best friends now. So I wouldn't stress too much about inconveniencing somebody when you're waving them down and asking them questions about that piece of property. Number 10, and this is not considering accessibility. So a lot of people, they get all excited, they're gonna buy their piece of Idaho land. I don't care how far it is, I don't want neighbors, I don't wanna see anyone. Well, geez, you didn't realize that road, it is a pain in the boop. You know, it's a pain to get through. It gets washed out every winter. You need changes to get up the hill. The accessibility is really difficult, and believe me, unless you're gonna stay at home for a month going up and down that road for a mile, 2 miles, every single day, 2 or 3 times a day, it wears on you. So just look at accessibility. You can still get some really cool properties with privacy and still have really good access. Drive down some of those roads in the summertime, in the springtime, especially in the springtime when everything's breaking up, and see if you like going 5 miles per hour over those ruts. If you can handle it, great. If not, be mindful of the accessibility. It's the accessibility in the wintertime. Are you the only one that's living back there year round? So now you're in charge of snow plowing and you have to plow out this road for a mile, half mile, whatever it is. So just take that in consideration. Talk to your agent when you find this really cool property. What is the accessibility like? It's huge. Do not overlook it. All right, if you're serious about buying in Sandpoint, buying vacant ground, do not do it alone. That's why I'm here to help you navigate through this process and avoid these costly mistakes. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever bought vacant ground and had an unexpected surprise? Let me know down below.